Hey Dunchbags and potential new viewers, what's going on? It's LandonRemixes here, and welcome to a video you guys have been probably hyped for a little while now. This is my top 10 albums of the year list, and before we get started into number 10, I'd just like to mention that I think this is the first top 10 albums of the year video on YouTube, or at least for people that do reviews typically. And a lot of the times people build up hype for them by uploading things like one of my favorite reviewers, ARTV Reviews, just did his top 10 worst songs of 2015 video. And I'm just gonna start it out big doing my top 10 albums. I've seen the little games you guys play, I've seen you guys guessing in the comments to see which one of the albums I reviewed this year was going to be my number one favorite album of 2015. And I kind of wanted to throw you guys on a loop with this one, so I think you guys will be surprised at what actually makes it to the number one spot this year. So I'm also going to link my top 10 albums of the year of 2014 in the description, along with the list of the top 10 this year. If you don't want to have this list spoiled for you, then I suggest not looking in the comments, but I'll also link my reviews to each of these albums. All of these ones that are in this list are ones that I either reviewed or included in rapid fire reviews, and all of these are surprisingly albums that I had on CD. I think I mentioned last year that I was only going to include in my reviews albums that were available on CD. This year I didn't quite do that. I spent a couple hours narrowing down my top 10 albums, and in the top 20 there were a few albums in there that are only available digitally, but I just happen to have every album on this list as a CD copy. Some of them I left in Maine, probably mistakenly, and some of them are newer. There are a lot of albums that have recently come out and that are coming out in the near future. At least the ones that released this week I don't think are top 10 material, so I think from now on I am going to cut off my top 10 albums list at the beginning of December. At least when I do it next year, I'm going to include anything that comes out this month in the 2016 list. But without further ado, let's dig into my top 10 favorite albums of 2015. Kicking off at number 10, we have 2 by Capital Kings, and as I mentioned in my review, this album isn't spectacular for a dance album, but for a Christian album, I think Capital Kings have really revolutionized a sound that we really haven't heard much before in dance music. They've created something interesting with lots of different styles and different sounds that I haven't heard them use before, and was an absolutely huge step up from their debut album, Capital Kings. I think this one's held up pretty well, even though it came out later in this year. And a lot of these albums in this list are going to be based, or their placement on this list is going to be based on how well they held up, because most of the reviews that I did this year were based on my thoughts as soon as I heard the record, and this is much later than most of these albums I reviewed. So a lot of albums that I initially thought were amazing aren't going to make this list, and a few albums that you might not expect to make this list are probably going to be on this. Like I said, Capital Kings absolutely killed it with this album, I think. Made a few awesome changes, like adding Chris Tomlin to Fireblazin, and overall they made a really solid dance record, one of the best Christian albums of the year. Number 9 might be one that some people are going to be pretty upset over, and that's Project 46's debut album, Beautiful. And this is the only straight, really progressive house album that's going to be on my list, so you can thank God right now. The reason why this album's on this list, and that it actually made my top 10, even though I only gave it an 8.5, is because of how freaking surprising it was. The first time I listened through it, I was like, wow, there's some really, really interesting sounds in here. There's different styles they've never used before, like in the track Forgettable, absolutely beautiful one. And overall, this album makes every single track somehow work. I didn't really like the track Friend Zone, as you guys know. I really didn't like it, but it does serve as a good interlude between Last Chance with Cascade and Memories with Laidback Luke, and they throw us on a curve with some melodic dubstep on Search and Rescue. Overall, this one was really just powerful and melodic. It's beautiful, just as the title would say, and even though I do have my picks with it, I think it really did deserve its spot on my top 10 this year. Number 8 is the debut album from Jack U, aka Skrillex and Diplo. Skrillex and Diplo present Jack U. And although, as mentioned by Anthony Fantano, the needle drop, this one is pretty formulaic. I think they use some very interesting sounds, and I think they absolutely kill it in a lot of styles they use on this one. The absolutely killer 2U with Aluna George. There's of course Febreze with 2 Chainz, which I always liked for some reason, even though the vocals are a little bit cringy. It's just a super catchy and fun track. Holla Out with Snails and Tarantula, that one's always a banger to listen to. And of course, Where Are You Now with Justin Bieber, which absolutely went off after this album released. Although I do have my picks with this album, such as the kind of generic big room nature of Jungle Bay, and the fact that Beats Knockin' kind of sounds exactly like Diplo's Express Yourself. I think this one made a really solid debut album and just a really fun thing to listen to, something that you can really enjoy, probably no matter what kind of music you listen to, and the success of Where Are You Now kind of shows that off. Number 7 is one that I think absolutely changed the way I listen to music, which in a lot of cases you'd think that would mean it would be a lot higher on my list. The fact that a lot of these tracks were pretty short, it was a pretty short album. A lot of these tracks seem very interlude-ish. Sakuraburst, Deconstructing Nature, managed to find itself in a lot of places where beauty is contracted with noise and machinery. Songs with the sounds of the tracks like Deconstructing Nature, Broadcast, and the Skyshifter VIP have been some of my favorites of this year, and definitely started off with this album. It just has these beautiful interludes and these awesome mechanical noisy sounds. And even though a couple of these tracks get pretty boring, like Floating Through a Frozen Atlantis, the remixes were absolutely on point on this one. Honestly, Sakuraburst couldn't have done much better. This album's absolutely killer. I think you can only grab it on Bandcamp, so go do that like right now, because it's absolutely killer. So really love this one, and like I said, changed the way I listen to music, so that's why it's on this list. My number 6 is a pretty new one. It's Justin Bieber's Purpose, and while a lot of people are saying they don't really like the vocal style of Justin Bieber and he hasn't changed much in that way, I think this one absolutely threw me on a curveball in means of production, and overall there's just a lot of really good content on this one. Content that you probably couldn't find when looking into Justin Bieber's old discography. This one's absolutely killer by means of bangers. It's got some pretty cool lyrical content, like on the track Love Yourself. We get once again Where Are You Now with Skrillex and Diplo, which although it's not my favorite on the album, still sounds good in the context of this. Mark My Words serves as a little bit odd of an intro. No Sense is a little bit whack in context of this as well, which is why it isn't higher on this list. And the lyrics are a little bit flat in tracks like Company, but overall I think this one absolutely killed. Definitely surprised me. I wasn't expecting something like this to come from Bieber, and I absolutely loved it in the end. My number 5 is one that I actually didn't even cover in a review, but rather a rapid fire review, Jamie XX in Color. And this is one that took me a few listens to really get into, but I think by this point in the year it's held up extremely well, as it came out in May of this year and I'm still enjoying the crap out of it. I do want to get a vinyl copy too, because man is it freaking good. Tracks like Gosh I've really gotten used to. I mentioned in my review that I didn't really like that as an intro. There's always I Know There's Gonna Be Good Times, which basically sounds like every club hip-hop track you'll ever hear, especially ones that have come out this year. But of course I've gotten used to that one too, and overall this album's just filled with a lot of atmospheric sounds, and the vocal appearances mainly from the XX's other members are pretty awesome as well. And overall this one's just great to listen to as a background. I listened to it a couple times on pretty long drives. Overall it's just really awesome to hear this album as a whole, and honestly one of the best studio albums probably could have come out this year, and really epic as a debut. You know when you're still listening to a record and it's holding up really well at the end of the year when it released very early in the year, that it's a good record, and that's what I found in Madeon's debut album Adventure, which is my number 4. This one is just so fun to listen to. I had so many rides, every time I drove to school I I'd pop this one in the car, and it's just a really fun one to listen to. There's tracks like Pay No Mind, La Lune with Dan Smith from Bastille. I noticed that this album seemed to get better and better every time I listened to it. Overall, this just made a really freaking awesome EDM and French house album, and I think he really killed it with this as a debut. Of course, it's not without a couple picks, but those are very minor, and I think this one definitely lived up to the hype that was coming up to it. Not as much as Porter Robinson's Worlds did last year for me, but this one was pretty good overall. Let's get into my number 3. Now, psych, I tricked you guys. My number 3 is Zed's True Colors, which a lot of you were predicting was going to be my number 1. And I thought it was going to be my number 1 for a while too, but I'm kind of going to explain it in context of this. In terms of track selection, this thing is nearly flawless. I listened to this end after end for so many weeks, and I know basically all the lyrics of this thing front and back by this point because I've listened to it so many times. As a creative sophomore album, I don't think this one really, other than a couple tracks like Transmission and True Colors, I really don't think Zed was expanding too much from his standard style, maybe with Bumblebee too, but honestly a lot of these sounds are sounds we've heard for a couple years in the EDM scene. Although I did get pretty used to Beautiful Now and started liking it, that was kind of my favorite, or for that matter, least favorite on the album when I first reviewed this back in May. My new least favorite is probably Illusion. I did love the vocal line on that, but the fact that it just has this really annoying, I don't even know how to explain it, there's like this really annoying printer sound in it or something, and that really bugs me and kind of ruins it for me as a closer for the album. After I listened to it more and more, I began to hate that one quite a bit. And like I said, based on track selection, this thing's basically immaculate. Based on trying to find new styles and pulling in things and progression as an artist, I don't think this one deserved to be number 1 or even 2, as you'll see on my list. Number 2 is probably going to be a number 1 on a lot of people's list this year. It's Kendrick Lamar's To Pimp a Butterfly. And although my review of this one got quite a number of dislikes, even though I was talking nothing but good things about this one, I really love this one, and it's held up extremely well. Listened to it quite a number of times on my trip from Maine to Washington, the most memorable being while traveling through Yellowstone National Park. And honestly, my favorites and everything have flopped so much on this album since I first got it. Kendrick's production on this one is absolutely phenomenal. Like, this is probably the best produced album of the year by far. And once you dig a little deeper into this, I found more enjoyment in the lyrical content, which I typically don't on albums. On songs like How Much a Dollar Cost and The Black of the Berry, which I had really respected before for being a banger, but digging a little bit deeper into the lyrical content, I think this one was really killer. This one's probably not number 1 because a few of the tracks got pretty old to listen to, the tracks that made up for kind of the story sense of this album, like Wesley's Theory, For Free, and Mortal Man toward the end of the album. Most of these tracks stayed pretty good. I ended up my favorites at this point are You and How Much a Dollar Cost. Those are just both really fun tracks to listen to. My favorite probably being You, just because it takes, it throws such a different direction than I've ever seen Kendrick go before, and I can't wait to see the kind of content he's going to push out over the next couple years. I really, really love this one, and it definitely deserves its place as number 2 on my list. Now, you guys are probably wondering, oh Landon, you only gave 2 9.5s this year, other than the one 10.0 I gave to the Eden Project earlier this year. You might be wondering how the heck I have a number 1 album that I somehow either rated lower or didn't review or something. My number 1 album of the year is one that I initially didn't like, but it's held up so much better than any other album this year. I haven't gotten tired of it in the slightest, and I've actually started to enjoy some tracks even more than I did toward the beginning. It's gotten better and better with every listen. I've learned the lyrics front and back. This is one that I gave a solid 8.0 earlier this year. It is Hillsong United's Empires. And like I said, I really wanted to throw you guys off the loop with this one. I have been kind of hinting toward it a little bit. Overall, this one I think had the most potential at the beginning of the year when they announced it to be my number 1. And while it was different than what I was expecting, during my review, I actually kind of gave it a lower rating because it was too much of a step out of the way from Zion, which is one of my all-time favorites, and I still do manage to like a bit more than this one. I think in a lot of other ways, vocally, production-wise, and just means of being an artist and this album as a whole, I think most of this is a step up from Zion. I think in every way, Hillsong United is slowly becoming a better group, and I can't wait to see what they do come the next couple of years. They released an awesome Hillsong Worship album that I reviewed earlier this year. I got the chance to see them live. Overall, over these past few months being at Northwest University, I've gotten so much more respect for the group as a whole. And although this album takes a much different direction than they went with Zion, they stepped down, make a chiller album with a lot of electronic sounds, I think this one is pretty close to perfection. And although I didn't really like the kind of sounds that were in Prince of Peace at first, or Heart Like Heaven. I ended up liking these quite a bit, and it's just a really awesome album. I can't wait to see what they do in the future. So thank you guys for sitting through this really long kind of rapid fire review style top 10 albums of the year video, and let me know what you guys think are your favorites. Maybe leave your top 5 or something down in the description. I know a lot of people's favorites are going to be Kendrick Lamar's because that one absolutely killed it. I just think Hillsong United's managed to hold up for me a little bit better this year than any other album. I think following this video I'm going to make a top 10 EPs video, and maybe if you guys want to see it I'm going to do a top 10 worst albums of the year video. And then close to the beginning of next year, I think I'm going to do a top 10 albums I'm most hyped for in 2016. Also, make sure to look forward to some more review content coming out very soon. I've got Troye Sivan's album, Coldplay's album that I'm going to review, and I'm going to just try to keep as many reviews going as possible. I've got still a couple Monster Cat things to do, some EP reviews, another rapid fire review after this, and this is just going to be a fun December. Also look forward to Vias for Vice Tone Volume 3. I should be recording it actually today. I'm probably going to record it tonight if I can. Anyway, I'm going to stop blabbering and let you guys get back to your day. Hope you enjoyed this top 10 video, and make sure to leave a like if you enjoyed. If you're new here and you like the way I talk about music, make sure to hit the subscribe button, because a lot of people here came last year and really encouraged me to start doing reviews after I released my top 10 video. It would be really awesome if that could happen again this year, and maybe be even a little more popular than my video was last year, which I think was a good success in the context of my channel as a whole. I love you guys, you're the best, and I'll see you later. Peace, guys.